So David Axelrod on his podcast gave a pretty interesting quote here. He says Democrat voters in Asheville, North Carolina are smarter, wealthier, and will show up to vote for Kamala, while he thinks Trump voters won't. This is why Kamala and Biden aren't helping. They benefit from the disaster that is Clay Travis's take on that. But here is David Axelrod giving quite the piece of sound on his Axe Files podcast.
Question about North Carolina. You had these killer storms, which, by the way, was a third big story this week.
Yes,
these
another
storms. And there's a lot of displacement in western North Carolina. Now, Asheville is a blue dot in that area, but there are a lot of Republican voters
Asheville's
there.
Key.
But those voters in Asheville are, they're, the kind of voters who will figure out a way to vote. They're upscale kind of liberal voters, and they're probably going to figure out a way to vote. I'm not sure a bunch of these folks who've had their homes and lives destroyed elsewhere in western North Carolina in the mountains there are going to be as easy to wrangle for the Trump campaign.
So we think that the MAGA voters are going to end up wiping their asses with the mail-in ballots, whereas the more upscale voters in liberal bastions like Asheville keep backstock of toilet paper, and so they will not have to do that. That is quite something. So yeah, the rich people in Asheville, the rich libs, are smart enough to figure out how to vote under these circumstances, but MAGA isn't.
Yeah, well, this really is the basket of deplorables thing.
Oh yeah, big time.
This is really a mask off moment. Not that they wore the mask very tightly before. This is what they think of half the country, more than half the country. This is what they think of you if you're rural. This is what they think of you if you're poor. This is what they think of you if you didn't go to college. This is what they think of you if you work with your hands. They think you're a lesser form of human, and this is a very old class attitude. It goes way back in American history. This goes back to the indentured servants, and there has always been this wealthy white class that despises that white working class.
Yep.
Thing is, they used to be Republicans, and now they're Democrats. That class is largely made up of Democrats now.
Yes. Yep. But he wasn't the only one to speculate as to how this might influence the election. Politico says Helene hit Trump strongholds in Georgia and North Carolina. It could swing the election. So, yes, the Washington media getting a little excited at the windfall this might create for Kamala Harris, although I think they are miscalculating, because if I had to guess, I would say that this government response where you have people trying to email FEMA for their $750 creates a lot more resentment towards the government than whatever votes you are going to net gain from the fact that some Trump voters are flooded out of their homes and can't get the mail-in ballots in and can't make it on the day of. But they speculate Hurricane Helene hit especially hard in heavily Republican areas of Georgia and North Carolina, a fact that could work to Donald Trump's disadvantage in the two swing states. Research has shown that major disasters can influence both voter turnout and voter preference, and Helene has pushed this contest into novel territory. It's the first catastrophic event in U.S. history to hit two critical swing states within 6 weeks of a presidential election, based on a Politico's E&E news analysis of data compiled by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. The challenge for Trump: the parts of western North Carolina and eastern Georgia that were flooded by the monster storm are largely Republican. In 2020, he won 61% of the vote in North Carolina counties that were declared a disaster after Helene. He won 54% of the vote in Georgia's disaster counties. Both Trump and Vice President Kamala Harris this week visited Georgia, a state that Biden won by just 11,779 votes in 2020. Georgia and North Carolina each have 16 electoral votes, and polls show that Trump is leading Harris by about 1 percentage point in each state, well within the margin of error. There's going to be a lot of voting alterations, and it probably is going to affect turnout, says Andy Jackson, director of the John Locke Foundation's Civitas Center for Public Integrity, a free market think tank in North Carolina. Now, both states face crucial decisions in the next few days about how to help people register and vote after massive flooding ripped away roads, shuttered towns, and dispersed residents. Those include whether to extend next week's voter registration deadlines, grant more time for voters to cast absentee ballots, and set up new polling places in areas where floods destroyed roads. State records show that nearly 40,000 absentee ballots were mailed to voters in the 25 North Carolina counties that were declared as a disaster following Helene. Fewer than 1,000 have been returned. In eastern Georgia's heavily Democratic Richmond County, 3 of 4 early voting sites appear to be undamaged, County Elections Chief W. Travis Doss Jr. said Friday. Doss's staff has also reached out to all 43 Election Day sites to determine their status, but has not heard back from about 30 of them due to power and internet outages. Until we get out there to assess for power and whatnot, I'm not sure what the situation will be, Doss said. Right now, of course, our immediate concerns were absentee and voting registration, and then the next step is early voting, and the next step is voting day. So they seem to think that the just raw effect of the fact that the hurricane hit red counties more than blue counties is going to be a net gain for Kamala. I don't agree with that. I think when you're the incumbent and you are the executive presiding over what is clearly an inadequate response, at the same time, like we covered in the last segment, there seems to be hundreds of billions of dollars that they could just, at will, send across the world. I think that is going to create a backlash. I think this will hurt Kamala much more than it will help. Especially since these states she's already down. I mean, it's very, very close, which is why this article was written, because in a very, very close race, anything can happen. But, I mean, this has to hurt Kamala. How could this not hurt Kamala?
Yeah, I mean, something he's not thinking of also is, do libs like being abandoned by the government?
Do they like, yeah, exactly. Do they like drowning? Yeah,
do they
exactly.
do they like not being able to get aid when their houses have been destroyed? I mean the liberals are a special bunch, but I don't think that's going to benefit them with anybody. And also remember those deplorables that you hate so much. They're going to be highly motivated to vote against the people who left them to their fate. And people will really take extraordinary measures to make sure they vote under circumstances like that. So, no, I don't think that's an accurate reading of the situation. But I do think it's a very revealing one in terms of the headspace that Axelrod and his class live in and how they see the American people.
Please clap.